Earlier this week, I covered the new features that we added as part of our Lightroom 9.5 August release. But Lightroom isn't the only app to get some new goodies. Adobe Camera Raw 18.5 was also released this week, and it continues our trend of not only introducing new features, but also adding meaningful improvements to existing ones. But instead of teasing you about this, how about we just dive in? All right, so this is Adobe Camera Raw 18.5. Now, of course, Camera Raw requires a host app, which means that you either have to load it through Photoshop or through Bridge, in which case you need the photography plan or the Creative Cloud Pro plan, which gives you access to that. And so, like I mentioned, we have new features and improvements to existing ones. And I want to start with improvements to existing ones, specifically the vector scope. Now, this is something that I'm actually really excited about that the team is doing, in that we released the vector scope initially 2 versions ago in 18.4. And then in 18.4.1, we updated it with some pretty important improvements, like making it more legible, adding more visibility to the skin tone line. And now in 18.5, we're adding even more features. So right now you can see this is the default orientation of the vector scope. And you can see that red is over here almost at this kind of like 11 o'clock position. Well, now you can rotate the color wheel of the vector scope. So if you right click, you can see here, there's an option to show red at 3 o'clock. What that does is it rotates the color wheel of the vector scope so that red is at the 3 o'clock position. And actually, if you look at color grading, you can see that it kind of matches. You can see that red is over here at the 3 o'clock position. And so there's just a bit more of a continuity. Also, there are a lot of video content creators who are used to the color wheel being in this orientation. So it just makes things more consistent. Of course, you can also turn it off to revert it back to the default configuration. The other option with VectorScope that we added is the ability to show lab color readouts. Now, if you have histogram opened, actually, let me turn it off first, just to illustrate. With histogram open, if you hover over your photo, do you see on the histogram there, there's that pill that has RGB? It shows you the red, green, and blue values wherever the cursor is hovering. If you right click, you can also now have lab color readouts. So now you can see instead of RGB, it's LAB. And also, if you happen to turn off the histogram and you only have vector scope, I just want to show you this is the position of that pill for the readout. And of course, if you toggle lab color readouts off, it'll revert to RGB. So that is just a new ability to show the lab color readout. And finally, with VectorScope, there's another feature that I forgot to show before, but if you go down here, you'll see there is this color sampler tool. It's a little dropper. And so if I click on it, what I can do is I can click in the image here at different parts of the photo. And you can see on the vector scope that we're plotting those colors on the vector scope. So first you can see the 3 different dots and what their RGB values are. But also if you look on the vector scope, you'll see where each of those color samples fall in the cluster on the vector scope. And I think that's pretty cool. So I just wanted to show that to you as well. I'm going to go ahead here and turn that off. All right, so that's it for VectorScope. I want to move on now to a feature that we actually just released in Lightroom as well. And so if you watched the What's New in Lightroom 9.5 video, you'll know what I'm talking about. But specifically, the feature is called Render to DNG. So Render to DNG has many use cases, but probably the most common one will be when you're using it in concert with Generative Expand. And Generative Expand was significantly improved in the last version of Adobe Camera Raw 18.4.1. And if you missed that video, don't worry, I'll leave a link to it at the end of this one, but you should definitely check it out because if you haven't seen what you can do with Gen Expand, you definitely need to. So let's say I have this photo here. I got this photo from Adobe stock. In fact, these are all Adobe stock photos that I got, and that shot from Venice was mine. But let's just say that, you know what? I need to create a square photo of this model over here. But as you can see, there's all this stuff surrounding the model. You've got the full studio setup. And watch, you can see here, if I go to crop over here, let's say I change this to 1 to 1. I want a square. And, I'm going to try to kind of position it so that I have her in the square. Well, I have all this other junk around her. And really, I just want a square with her and kind of the seamless. I don't want to have to deal with cloning all this stuff out, it's just going to take too much time. And so this is where render to DNG really comes in. I'm going to go ahead back to crop here. Let's turn off the lock so I can do a manual crop. And I'm just going to crop to the model. So I'm just going to make this tight crop here. I'm not worried about aspect ratios or anything like that. I'm just going to keep it like this. All right. So now I've got her here in this crop. The problem is if I wanted to enable expand and get, an expand with a 1-to-1 aspect ratio, I can't because like I just said, everything around her is still here. These pixels are still here. So if I go to the try dot over here, you'll see an option called render to DNG. I'm going to go ahead and click on it and you'll see this dialog. And this is important because it says that render to DNG generates a new file with current edits permanently applied, similar to exporting a JPEG or a TIFF. And this is important. So any of the edits that you apply to your photo, including the crops, including the masks, everything, when you select render to DNG and you click OK on that dialog, what we're going to do is we're going to create a TIFF file, and then we're going to wrap that TIFF file in a DNG wrapper. So any previous edits you have, they're going to be baked in. And so let me show you the benefit here. I'll go ahead and click OK. And now you'll see a new file appears right alongside the original. And again, the original has the crop. I can go ahead and reset this and we have our photo just like we did before. But with the photo that we just created through render to DNG, first you can see it registers up here as a TIFF. So this is a TIFF in a DNG wrapper. And an important distinction is this is not a raw DNG, like a linear DNG. You can't use, for example, tools that are specific to raw files. However, because we've rendered this as a new file, I can go ahead and enable expand. And look at that. We don't have any of the surrounding pixels that we had in the original photo. Now what I can do is go ahead and change this to 1-to-1. And then there we go. We already have the surrounding areas in Gen Expand. And like I covered in the What's New in ACR 18.4.1 video, all you need to do is click on this Generate button over here. And there you go. We now have a square photo without having to deal with any of the surrounding parts of the studio. And so I can have made this a square. I could have made it a 16:9 if I wanted to have some copy space for an ad or something. But the point is that it just makes it a lot easier to use Gen Expand when I can just kind of snip away the surrounding pixels and only focus on what I actually want to expand from. Now, you might be asking, well, can't I just, like save the file to a new, TIFF or a DNG or export it? Absolutely, you can do that. But this process kind of saves you several steps because normally you'd have to go through the export process and select a location and export and then navigate to that location, find the file, and then import it. This does everything in one shot. It kind of exports the file, it creates a new file, but it places it right alongside the original file. And again, it's one of those things, there might be a situation where you quickly just need to bake a file. You need to just get those edits baked because you want to share it with someone else, but you don't want to provide the settings and stuff. Or you have it as a raw and you don't want to provide the raw. Well, this just makes it a lot easier to generate a new file that you can deliver very quickly. All right, let's move on to our new feature in Adobe Camera Raw, and that is blemish removal. So blemish removal was actually released in Lightroom Mobile, I think last Max, so last October. And so we've since made some serious improvements to it, and we're bringing it to Adobe Camera Raw. So let me show you how to use it. And so blemish removal is just one of those tools where, like, when you need it, you need it. And so you'll find it under the Remove panel. Under the distraction removal section here, there is now an option for blemishes. And so I'm going to go ahead and expand it, and then I'm going to click on apply. And what will happen is there will be an AI model that's used to identify blemishes. Here, let me zoom in a bit. That are both kind of ephemeral, so kind of like acne, things that generally go away, and also permanent marks like moles and freckles. And so let's go through this new panel over here because there are a few components that you need to understand. We'll start with the amount slider. So you would probably think that the amount slider is one of those things like any other amount slider where it just controls the strength of all of the things that were acted upon. In this case here, blemishes, but it's a little bit different. So the amount slider controls kind of like the, I would say, temporary blemishes or the ephemeral blemishes like acne. And it doesn't restore or remove all of the spots evenly. Rather, what happens is if I hide this temporarily, what we do during the blemish detection phase is we apply a prominence score to each of the spots that we detect. And so as we start reducing the slider, where you're going to start to see, don't look at the slider, look at the face. You're going to start to see spots start to be restored in the photo. And we're restoring spots when the slider's up here, we're restoring spots with the smallest or lowest prominence scores. And as we go to the left, we start to reintroduce spots that have a much higher prominence score. So if I go to 0 here, well, everything is back. And as I start going to the right, we start removing the spots that have the highest prominence. And so this allows you to kind of dial in and dial out if you want to restore any of those spots. The fade slider is a little bit different. The fade slider is primarily for controlling the visibility of permanent marks, so like freckles or moles, those kinds of things. And you can see if I bring the fade slider to the left, like look over here and over here with these two little freckles. As I bring them to the right, you see how they are gone. In fact, let me zoom out again because I think there were a few more. Yeah, like on her arm over here. You can see how as I bring it to the left, those are fully restored. And as I bring them to the right, they are fully hidden. So you can control the presence of that as well. Now, of course, there is also the ability to refine. So this button over here will load a few things. First, it'll load an overlay showing you all of the spots. Here, again, I'll zoom in again a little bit. It'll show you all of the spots that were detected and acted upon. And so you could be like, you know what? I actually want some of these things. I want them here fully. I don't want them to be affected by the fade slider, or I don't want them to be removed at all. And so the way that I usually work is I'll use this mute over here, the little eyeball icon, and I'll look at the photo and I'm gonna be like, "You know what? That, freckle over here and this one here, I want those." And so with restore selected, I'm just gonna paint over here, and you can see that that spot comes back, and same thing here. Those spots come back, and now if I click apply really quickly, that fade slider will not touch those 2 moles because they have been fully restored. Now, let's just say, you know what? Actually, this person, she wants them hidden. So you can go ahead and select remove. And then with remove, you can adjust your brush size. And just like with anything else, you could make strokes over here um, and it will act on them. And when you're done with your refinement, again, just click on apply and basically you're done with that process. And you can see here again, this was the unedited photo. Again, I got this from Adobe stock, but this is the processed photo using blemish removal. Now, blemish removal also works when you have multiple people in a photo. So again, 2 more people. These are 2 separate photos. I just put them onto a single document to illustrate this functionality. So just like before, all you need to do is click on apply for it to do the blemish detection and removal. But here's a key difference. You see over here? It uses people detection and it puts each person in its own little thumbnail. So what does this mean? Well, if I select person 1 and I press the V key, for example, you'll see here it's toggling the overlay showing you what areas were acted upon. And then if I click on person 2, it only shows the overlays for that person too. Or you can select all people, and then you'll see the blemishes for all people detected in the photo. So what does this mean? Well, basically, you have discrete control for the amount and fade sliders for each person detected. So with the amount slider here, you can see I can take the fade for the person on the left, and I can bring it all the way to the right, and it's not affecting the person on the right. It's only affecting the person on the left. Same thing here. If I select person 2, you see how the slider resets because I haven't done anything with person 2 yet, but I can go ahead and also adjust accordingly. Maybe I want to make this a little bit less like that. Also, if I go to refine, you can see here, if I select person 1 and then go to the restore brush, you'll see the overlays just for person 1, same thing for person 2 or all. This just makes it easier for you to kind of visualize, all right, I'm going to work on the person on the left first. Again, you can use the mute to determine what you want to remove or restore. This case here, I think Blemish Removal did a great job just overall out of the gate. And again, if we toggle this, like, yeah, I mean, the thing that I really appreciate about the blemish removal is that the model does a really good job at preserving the natural texture of the skin. If we kind of zoom in here, let me press V to hide this. Let's zoom in. I mean, you can see the natural texture looks really good, really natural. And that's one of the most important parts about blemish removal is that you don't want to have like these uh, changes in skin texture between what was there and what we acted upon. And of course, if you have several photos of a person, you can copy the blemish edit and then batch paste it on the subsequent photos. Of course, it has to run separately on each photo to do the kind of independent detection and removal. But if you just have a bunch of photos, you can do that in one shot. You'd basically just go to the try dot over here, go to copy selected edit settings. I'll go ahead and change this to modified. And then you can see under remove, you'll just want to make sure that blemish is selected. You would then click copy, select your other photos, and then click paste. All right, so there's one more feature that I want to show you in Camera Raw 18.5. I'll just go to this photo from Venice again. And it's actually a preference option. So you can go to the preferences by clicking on this gear icon up here. And you'll see there is this generative AI section. And there is a checkbox, enable generative AI features. Below it, you could see it says enable features that use generative AI, such as gen remove, gen expand, and distracting people removal. So before I do anything, let me actually go over here and just illustrate. You can see we have a checkbox here for use generative AI. You can see there's a checkbox here for enable expand, and back under remove, there is distracting people removal over here. All three of these features use Firefly as part of the generative AI process. Now, I'm not going to editorialize over, who this is for or whether this is for you. I just wanted to show it to you because I think it's important. If I go here again and I select the gear icon and I deselect this checkbox and click OK, well, now you'll see that the use generative AI checkbox for gen remove is gone, distracting people removal is gone, and gen expand is gone. So there's no possibility for you to use those generative AI tools with that option deselected. So really quickly, I'll turn it back on. I just want to show you one more thing. First, you could see it's back. There's gen expand. Let's go to remove. And I'm going to make a generative AI stroke. So let's make a small brush, something like this. And I'm just going to, remove this light trail. All right, so that's gone. And again, I use generative remove, and you can see I've got my variations here. And so now I'm going to go ahead and deselect this and click OK. And this time you're going to be provided with a warning dialog that says, hey, this photo already has generative AI edits. And so if you turn this off, you won't be able to modify those edits, like the variations that you had access to, you won't be able to use them because the tool is turned off. So you can click OK. You can see here now that it's gone. You're dropped into the regular remove tool. Now, though, if I go ahead and I turn this back on, you'll see, well, now we have access to those three variations for that gen remove stroke. You can see, let me turn on the overlays for this gen remove stroke over here. So just wanted to show you if this is something where you're like, you know what, I never want to see these options here for whatever reason, just go ahead and turn that off. And so, again, for me, I'm definitely going to keep them on. All right, so those are the new features added to Adobe Camera Raw 18.5. Not just new features, but also improvements to existing features. And I know this is going to be, without a doubt, one of the more common comments. You're going to probably say, "Well, cool. When am I going to see this in Lightroom?" Well, one of the things we are actively looking at are the comments. And so, if there are features that are in Camera Raw that are not yet in Lightroom, and it's something that's really important to you, leave a comment because I promise you, I share this with the product managers so that we can kind of stack rank what we have to focus on most. And with that said, Lightroom just got Gen Expand. Lightroom got render to DNG support, and so it wouldn't be a stretch of the imagination to know that okay, eventually blemish removal will hopefully make it into Lightroom. Vectorscope will hopefully make it into Lightroom. but let us know what features that are in Camera Raw that you're most excited for to have in Lightroom. With that, I mentioned that if you missed what's new in Adobe Camera Raw 18.4.1, specifically Gen Expand and the improvements to vectorscope, I've got this video here where you can see what YouTube thinks you might like. As always, a thumbs up is greatly appreciated, as is clicking on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.